The following episode will contain the names of people and places set in the fictional world of the Hyborian Age. With that in mind, be aware that Steeven has an uncanny knack for pronouncing many of these names incorrectly. Listener discretion is advised.
You know who you are? Steeven is my name. Even Steeven.
Will you say something, Steeven?
Steeven or Else Media.
Conan's on a mission with a crew of Tyranian soldiers when the group is attacked by a horde of hairy hillmen. Conan, along with a Cushite named Juma and Prince Yezdegerd's daughter, Princess Yolanda, survive the ordeal, only to be taken captive by their attackers. Oh yeah, did I mention that there's a giant slug in the story? That's right, a giant slug! I'm so excited! Welcome to Hither Came Conan, the podcast that's never ridden a giant slug, though it really wants to. But then be honest, hasn't every podcast at one time or another just plain yearned to take a joyride, like bareback on a mammoth slug? Crom knows I have. I'm your host, my name is Steeven, and I want you to relax, folks. Just close your eyes and allow your imagination to drift. Give it permission to frolic and dance across the jeweled thrones of Hyboria as I take you through another exciting Conan adventure. But then again, now that I think about it, you don't want to do any of that. Not while you're operating like, a motor vehicle or crossing the street or wrestling gators or, engaging in any type of activity that would put your physical well-being at serious risk if you were like closing your eyes and relaxing and junk. So don't do that. Be safe.
No, you're right. Safety first.
Anyway, today we travel north from Agripur and spend a bit of time in the Valley of the Sun as we take a great long look at Conan the Barbarian number 37 from Marvel Comics. This issue sports a cover date of April 1974, though it hit the stands in January. It sold for just 20 cents, and it is entitled The Curse of the Golden Skull. It was written by Roy Thomas with art by Neil Adams. The letters were by John Costanza, and the colorist was Glynis Wein.
Into the boat!
Over 8,000 years before the birth of Conan, the Lemurian wizard Rotath died in a temple, cursing those who slew him, including a king and the Atlantean Cole, before placing a final, unspeakable curse upon his bones. Thousands of years later, a hillman finds a solid gold skeleton in a ruined mountaintop temple. Thinking that he can use the gold to help fund the hillman rebellion against the Tyranians, he takes hold of the skeleton and suddenly screams as he's enveloped in a blinding light. Months later, Conan of Cimmeria rides with Tyranian cavalry, escorting Princess Yolanda. Their patrol is ambushed by a group of well-armed and highly organized hillmen. Conan, Yolanda, and a Cushite companion named Juma are the only survivors. The captives are taken to the Valley of the Sun, where Rotath, now a living idol of gold, presides over a growing city built on slave labor and the worship of his reawakened remains. Yolanda is presented as tribute, while Conan and Juma are driven into the mines to dig the precious metal that fuels Rotath's power. Life underground is brutal as Conan toils away, studying the tunnels and the guards' routines. Days later, Conan and Juma investigate why much of the gold they find is collected and taken deeper into the mine. It's here that they stumble across the devil of the pits, a colossally monstrous slug. Conan and Juma stuff 2 sacks with gold and flee as the slug gives chase. Chaos erupts when the devil of the pits bursts into the mine, swallowing men whole as it continues its pursuit of the Cimmerian and his Cushite companion. Soon, following Conan and Juma, the beast crashes into the plaza as Rotath is about to marry the princess. Conan quickly realizes that the slug consumes gold and manages to put Rotath in its path. The creature, ravenous for the glitter, envelops the sorcerer and consumes the golden idol. Rotath's resurrected reign destroyed by the very lust that sustained it. With its hunger satisfied, the giant slug returns to its underground home as Conan frees Princess Yolanda and with Juma at his side, mounts a captured horse and rides out of the Valley of the Sun and into the next chapter of his fate. All right, so according to Roy Thomas in his book, Barbarian Life, a literary biography of Conan the Barbarian, Volume 1, this issue is a comic that, for a bunch of accidental reasons, turned out to be kind of a big deal. First off, this issue is the only color Conan story ever penciled by Neil Adams, or at least up to that point, and maybe for a long time afterwards. I don't know if that's still the case, but at the time that I guess he wrote the book, that was the case. Anyway, apparently Mr. Adams had inked or otherwise been involved on a couple of other Conan-related jobs later, but this one's special. It's the only time he turned in full pencils for a color Conan tale. I mean, that's already an eyebrow raiser right there, right? Neil Adams on Conan? Yes, please.
Yes, 1,000 times yes.
Roy writes that despite earlier artistic friction between him and Neil, while they worked on both the Uncanny X-Men and the Avengers, the two did keep a mutual respect. And so Roy had offered Neil a chance to draw a Conan story, and Neil accepted. And here's where everything gets a bit squiffy. The story Neil and Roy started wasn't the story that eventually published here in this issue, but instead it was meant for an issue of Savage Tales, the black and white magazine that came before Savage Sword of Conan. Their original plan was to create a 30-page plus story that would adapt the short L. Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter Conan tale called The City of Skulls. In the de Camp Carter version, Conan and his friend Juma of Kush, they serve as mercenaries in the Turanian army assigned to escort Princess Zasara to her wedding. But their detachment is ambushed in the Talakma foothills, and only the three survive to be captured. The survivors are taken to Shambhala, the skull-adorned capital of hidden Meru, where the grotesque Rinpoche, or God King of Meru, Jalang Thongpa, urged by his wizard, Tanzong Tengri, claims Zasara for himself. It's a lot of names. Anyway, Conan's attempt to fight back leaves him magically drugged, and both men condemned to slave at the oars. Conan and Juma escape, return to Shambhala, and burst into the Rinpoche's wedding ritual, slaughtering priests and killing the wizard. When the living statue of Yama moves to crush them, Juma hurls Jalong Thongpa into the statue's path. The Rinpoche is crushed, the spell breaks, and Conan, Juma, and Zasara flee the city to finish their mission. So that's a little similar to what we got in issue 37. You can see where they took, or what they took, from that story and put it into this issue of Conan. But then here's what happened. So everything seemed to be going along okay, and then the decision was made that their story go into the color Conan the Barbarian comic instead of the black and white magazine. Though Roy doesn't exactly recall who is behind this change, it did mean that Roy and Neil's 30-page plus story had to be compressed into just 19 pages. The bigger snag came from our favorite Conan writer, L. Sprague de Camp. And I do mean that sarcastically. I mean, de Camp obviously has his place in Conan history and has certainly played a big role in keeping the character alive, before Roy and Marvel Comics came along. But everything I read about that guy, I don't know, makes me feel like he's a bit of an ass.
An ass is an ass is an ass is an ass.
Anyway, the issue here was that Roy, he thought that the legal permissions to adapt de Camp and Lynn Carter's prose Conan work, he thought they were already in place, but de Camp backed away at the last minute, pulling the permission that Roy and Neil had been working under. Which, come on, I mean, I understand the idea of maintaining control of your artistic works, but we are talking about stories based on characters in a world that de Camp didn't even create. And though Lynn Carter was all for having his Conan tales adapted into comics, de Camp seemed to think that his work was above all that. Like his stuff was better than mere comic books. So, yeah, sounds like an ass to me.
Yeah, that is exactly what I'm saying. Exactly.
Anyway, Neil was 5 pages in when the permissions were yanked. However, it's here that DeCamp shows a bit of grace by allowing Marvel one-time permission to keep the character of Juma in this issue, seeing as, he was already drawn and stuff. But from that point on, the story couldn't be City of Skulls. It's here where Roy's resourcefulness and a generous assist from Glenn Lord saved the day. Glenn Lord, if you remember, was the literary agent for the Howard estate, and he allowed Roy to adapt a short Robert E. Howard tale called The Curse of the Golden Skull, in which a magician named Rotath is dying, having been killed by Cole, who never actually appears in the story. As Rotath is dying, he places a curse on his bones. Thousands of years later, in the modern world, all that's left of Rotath is his skull, which has turned to gold. An explorer comes across the golden skull and is then killed by a scorpion that has been sleeping inside it.
The scorpion, is it still here?
What's even more interesting is that Conan the Barbarian number 37 came out during a paper shortage, which, based on everything I could find online, was more of a toilet paper shortage that may or may not have been caused by Johnny Carson. Not sure what that has to do with the paper used to make comics, but at the time, both Marvel and DC cut back on the number of titles they published for a short time, just in case, I guess. Conan the Barbarian, obviously, was one of the titles they continued to publish, which, of course, speaks volumes about its popularity. But even after all of that, the changing from a 30-page black and white story that adapted one particular Conan tale to making it a 19-page color story that couldn't adapt that particular Conan story anymore, and instead adapted a different story altogether, well, we still got a pretty good goddamn issue. In fact, Conan the Barbarian number 37 became, in Roy's words, the best-selling issue of Conan the Barbarian for several years, before and after, with the Buscema drawn number 38 a close runner-up. So yeah, there you go. Other than a few more fun little facts that I'll dribble out during the next segment, that is all I got. So in other words, folks, grab up your copies of Conan the Barbarian number 37 because we are about to dive. So we will start, as always, with the cover. I both love this cover and am very confused by it at the same time. It's a Neil Adams cover, so that already makes it pretty gosh darn good looking. And it features Conan front and center. He's holding a broken sword in his right hand and a mace in his left hand, and he's grappling with some kind of creature that is mostly off screen, but bits of it are stretching like slime or Mr. Fantastic or whatever, and it's reaching out, and it's got one bit of it wrapped around Conan's left hand or left wrist, and another bit wrapped around Conan's left thigh. And on the floor behind him is the princess, Yolanda. What's that her name? Yolanda? Yeah, Yolanda. She's cowering in fear. She's half naked. Just, because it's a Conan cover. We say this all the time. There has to be a half naked girl on the cover.
I was half naked!
And if there's not a girl who appears in the issue at all, then they stick a generic or just, a made-up girl on the cover that has nothing to do with the story. And as I've said before, Roy refers to that woman as Mirage. But here we actually have a character from the issue, Yolanda. What we also have in this cover that is not in the issue is the big bad standing behind Conan directing this creature that, again, most of it is off camera. And I'm assuming it's supposed to be the slug. But the big bad behind Conan is not Rotath, or it may be. At first I thought it was a female, but it could just be a really, really skinny, frail-looking guy, tall and skinny guy. Can't really tell. They have a golden skull for a head, sharp, pointy claws, or at least long fingernails. Rotath does not appear in this way in the issue. Maybe the costume or the robes that this version of Rotath is a bit of the same, but again, it made me think of a woman, just the way that the vest is fastened across their chest and the little tight trunks they're wearing. But I don't know. It's a cool cover, but it's just confusing as why Rotath was portrayed in such a way. Did Neil make up the cover or draw up the cover before they had finalized what the story was going to be about? I don't know. Probably. That's probably what happened.
Okay, I guess that makes sense.
So let's get into the story itself. We'll go to page 1. And from here on out, when I am using page numbers, if you're looking at the actual issue, I'm going to be talking about the story page numbers. So if there's like 2 ads between pages 3 of the story and pages 4 of the story, and those ad pages are numbered, and that makes the story page in your issue page number 6, I'll still be referring to it as page 4 because it is story page number 4. Does that make any sense? I hope so. Anyway, we open with Rotath of Lemuria lying on the steps of this temple. He's dying, says that he was killed or slain by Cole, the Atlantean, Cole the Destroyer.
Everything is destroyed.
The king of Lemuria, Asphodel IV, had sent Cole to slay Rotath for some reason or another. The battle apparently ended here in this temple. This is far away from Lemuria, apparently. It's not a temple it's not his home. It's not, they mention here in this first page that had he been attacked at home, because they waited until he was away from home. It says, had he been attacked at home, I keep saying home, it would have been different because his powers are at their greatest when he's in his crib, instead of saying home one more time. But no, he's in some kind of temple to a nameless god. There's a statue behind him at the top of these steps where Rotath is dying. And it's some kind of weird creature that's crouched there with its hands long-fingered clawed hands resting on its knees. It's got a bald head and pointy ears, and it doesn't look like something that you'd want to hang out with. And as Rotath is dying, he curses the king, he curses Cole, and he places like a blood curse on his own bones. He calls out this name of this nameless god. They don't give us the name. They just tell us that he has been a priest of nameless gods. And as he's dying, he uses his last breath to call down these curses. And then as he's cursing his own bones, he cries out a name which he has never before uttered, never dared to utter in his life. And then weird, crazy shit as we get to page 2 is like shooting out of him. Golden light with weird, demon-looking creatures showing up in the light.
Looks like I picked the wrong week to quit amphetamines.
And then we move forward. And I like the narration here. I really try not to read as much from these books or as these issues as I end up doing, but sometimes I'm looking at these pages and I see the narration and it just describes everything much better than I ever could. So after Rotath officially dies in some kind of strange, demonistic devil curse, the narration goes like this. Years stretched into centuries. Centuries became ages. The green oceans rose and wrote an epic poem, and the rhythm thereof was terrible to hear. The races of men passed as smoke drifts from the breast of a summer, and many mountains of the earth sank, and many islands became mountains. Aye, even some on which sprawled shadow-haunted temples. Then one day. And that's where we meet this hillman, beautifully drawn by Neil Adams. This second page here, after the Rotath part where we meet the hillman and he stumbles across this summit, he's out exploring, far, far away from wherever it is he's from. He's a hillman, so far away from Turin and Agripur and the hills surrounding those places. And he spies a mountaintop in the distance that is shrouded in mist, and he gets curious and he climbs to the top. And so this second page, like I said, once you get past the Rotath part, for some reason gives me some real Tarzan vibes.
As Tarzan had his Jane, as Napoleon had his Josephine, as Frankie Lane had whoever he had.
And for some reason, that also made me dig this second page even more than I probably should have, because it's really just a guy coming out of the jungle, seeing a mountain, climbing up to the top, and stepping into this temple. On page 3, this hillman is now in the temple. We can see now that it is the temple that Rotath died in. It's crumbled, it's ruined. The creepy creature statue at the top of the stairs, the head is off of it, the arm is broken. And on the stairs, there is a skeleton, and it appears to be made of solid gold. Now, The hillman sees this, assumes, well, this has got to be gold. But I should probably check. That's probably what he's thinking. They don't say any of this. I'm just postulating here that he sees this skeleton and he's thinking, we got this whole rebellion going on against Agripper. Some gold would come in handy, but it's a skeleton. Why would there be a skeleton of gold up here? Maybe I better check it out. Make sure it is gold. And if it is, I will take it home. And so he approaches the skeleton and he places his hand on it and all hell breaks loose.
What's that sound?
The people going nuts. It's a madhouse.
I should add, by the way, that when he touches the skeleton, he actually places his hands on the skull. And yeah, as I said, all hell breaks loose. And you know what? I'm going to read again from the narration because this is one of my favorite bits. And the reason it's one of my favorite bits is this last panel here on page 3 of the story. After he has touched the skull, you see him. I mean, if you're just looking at the art, he is, well, it appears that he's dying in an explosion of golden light. If you read the narration, though, you discover that something else is happening here. So here's what it says. He reached out, slowly, tentatively. At last, he laid his hand upon the golden skull, and a sudden, deathly shriek broke the stillness as flesh flowed from one set of bones to another, and new life was traded for old. Afterward, all was silence once more in the temple of the nameless gods. So, some kind of transference happened here. We know from, of course, the synopsis that what's happening here is that whatever was Rotath is taking everything of the hillman. Basically, it's taking all of his flesh and using it to create a new body for himself as Rotath, and we will see him later. Now, these 3 pages, these first 3 pages of the story, they actually represent what is the whole of the Robert E. Howard vignette, The Curse of the Golden Skull. I call it vignette because that's what Roy kept calling it in his book, which I assume means that maybe it was something that was never published. It was just one of those things that Roy had written, maybe started and didn't finish and put in his big trunk, or it's just this small 3 or 4 page story that he wrote and again threw in his trunk without sending it, or maybe it got rejected. I don't know. If you remember a while back, I talked about how Glenn Lord, I think it was Glenn Lord, the guy who is the literary agent for the Howard estate, that he's the one that ran across this big trunk full of papers, stories, printed stories, scraps of stories, bits of tales, unpublished works, noodling, that kind of stuff of Robert E. Howard. And this, I'm assuming that's where this came from because they kept calling it a vignette, or Roy kept calling it a vignette.
Vignette, a brief, evocative description, account, or episode.
Anyway, these 3 pages, that's The Curse of the Golden Skull, with, of course, the exception that the dude who finds the golden skull in the comic, or the golden skeleton in the comic, is from Conan's time, while the dude who finds it in the Bob Howard version is from the present, or Robert E. Howard's present. And, of course, he dies by getting stung by a scorpion, whereas this guy seems to disappear in a golden light.
Hither Came Conan will return after these messages.
Remember, the 5th of November.
The gunpowder treason and plot.
For I know of no reason why the gunpowder treason should ever be forgot.
Coming soon to the Magazines and Monsters podcast feed.
A deep dive into one of the best works of Alan Moore's career.
Join me, Billy D., and my co-host Dr. Ange as we explore the incredible series
V for Vendetta.
Curious about the origins of the Man of Steel? Check out the Superman Super Show. My name is Steeven, and along with Ed Moore, we're on a mission to read every Superman story from the Golden Age, one comic book at a time. In each episode, we dive into Superman's earliest adventures, from leaping over tall buildings to battling mad scientists, sharing our thoughts and plenty of laughs. New episodes drop every 2 weeks. Subscribe to the Superman Super Show wherever you listen to podcasts, and join us on this journey through comic book history. And now back to Hither Came Conan.
Turn the page, and we are on page 4 of the story. This is the title page, and I'm going to read the narration again because I love how it leads in. It goes from what happened in those first 3 pages and takes us into what is the main part of the story. So that was like the prologue, and now we're getting into the main part of the story. Long months have passed since that horror streak dawned. The half-hearted rebellion of the Turanian hill tribes has strangely stiffened its back, even as Turin's Prince Yezdegerd is busy conquering Hyrcanian city-states across the inland sea. But there are other things than empire building which concern King Yildiz, father to Yezdegerd and wearer of the Turanian crown. And it is such a thing which has sent several score of Agrippa's finest into the wind-whipped northern wastes, where lurks the curse of the Golden Skull. Yeah, it takes us right to our title. I love that. I love that kind of stuff. Tells us at the bottom, Roy Thomas is the author and the editor, Neil Adams is the artist, and that this is inspired by the short story by Robert E. Howard, creator of Conan, and that Juma is the creation of L. Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter and is used by their kind permission. And I wonder if that's sarcasm. I feel like it's sarcasm. Their kind permission. Oh, they've graced upon us the ability to use their character, which would all be focused at de Camp, of course. Now, this is a splash page, and immediately, if there were no text on this page at all, I would immediately be drawn into this story for 2 simple reasons. One, Conan is front and center.
Oh, hi, Conan. How are you?
He's got a black or grayish black fur vest on. His legs are bare. I think he's got black or gray little trunks. They're up in the mountains, they're up in the hills, there's snow all over, and Conan is in his element. So his arms are bare, his chest is practically bare because the vest doesn't quite cover his broad, muscly chest.
You're so big and so well grown.
And he's wearing a helmet with horns coming out of the side. I don't know what it is about Conan and helmets with horns on them, but the dude is addicted to those helmets. And he's wearing one here.
Nice hat!
But the second thing that immediately draws my eye, once I look at Conan and go, that looks cool as hell. Because again, it's Neil Adams.
What are you doing, Neil?
Next to Conan is a guy with, it's some kind of hat or helmet that is shaped like bird wings. It makes me think a little bit about Warlord because Neil Adams and Mike Grell, their artwork kind of is similar in my mind. But the dude's helmet is so freaking cool. I just love it. And immediately I'm like, I want to read a comic about this guy. This is the guy I want to start following. Unfortunately, he dies in a couple of pages. Spoiler alert there for you. But yeah, I love that helmet.
And now, a bit of fun.
Here's a little fun fact. This title page here actually started life as page 1 of that longer adaptation that I talked about in the info bit, where Roy and Neil's Conan story was to be part of an issue of Savage Tales. Now, looking at this page, at this title page, there's a conversation going on between Conan and the guy with the winged helmet. And I just, if you haven't seen the issue, I'll put some images up on Instagram and Blue Sky. But when I say winged helmet, it's not like Thor's helmet where there's just wings on the side of it. You really have to see it. It's spectacular. But that guy is their captain, Captain Kiribor. And he and Conan are having a conversation. And Conan is basically telling him that he doesn't like it. He feels exposed. They're up there in the hills where just months ago, he fought some of these hillmen. It was all the way back in Conan the Barbarian number 31. And I just have to say, because I tend to tangent, saying hillmen is just really weird in my brain because all I'm thinking of is the show The Different World, and they went to Hillman College. And so when I hear hillman or say hillman, I'm thinking of a student on a different world. So,
It's a different world from where you come from.
If you find that I'm really stressing hillman or hillmen, that's why, because it's the only way I can make my brain feel better about it, I guess. But Conan explains that He fought the hillmen months ago. They barely escaped with their lives. And he finds it odd that they have made it this far into the hills and have seen none of them. They've not been attacked. They haven't even seen any scouts. And Conan doesn't like it. Kirabor is, of course, your typical captain who thinks he knows everything. And because Conan is a barbarian, a Cimmerian, and that they're superstitious, he just pushes Conan's worry aside, telling him, "No hillman in his right mind would dare molest a hand-picked troop of Turanian cavalry." So he's a bit cocky. He's a bit too confident, because right away on the next page, an arrow comes out of nowhere, killing one of the soldiers. And following that, a big group of hillmen just come riding into this little valley that they're in, this path, this trail, whatever it is. And they seem to be very well armed, and they seem to be armored much better than they were when Conan first met them. And they seem to be very highly dedicated, highly regimented. They're very highly disciplined, and they commence to kick in everybody's asses. Conan, of course, fights back like the rest of the Turanians, and Conan is kicking some ass. I will say, looking at page 5 of the story, there's a moment here where Conan stabs a guy through the chest and then bashes another guy in the face with his shield. It's exciting to look at, but not as exciting as a John Buscema action scene. There's just something about John Buscema, said it before, the way he adds all this extra grit that makes it look like whenever there's a fight, they're just kicking up all kinds of shit off the ground, and just that it's a really active, really active fight.
It's not fake. It's totally brutal.
Page 6 of the story, Conan is fighting some dude. He's on horseback. Conan's on horseback. Another guy comes up from behind on a horse, grabs a big old dagger, leaps from the back of the horse. He's about to, his plan is to leap across what looks to be like 4 or 5 feet, land on Conan and stab him in the back. But suddenly a spear juts up from out of nowhere and catches the guy in the belly. And the spear is held by a Cushite named Juma, or as he calls himself, Juma the Black. And I have to give Roy, I guess, credit here. He's trying to open up the conversation about racism here. But Juma saves Conan and then tells Conan, "No need to thank Juma the Black, Cimmerian. After all, we're all brothers, aren't we? Under the skin." And then he turns and he looks at the rest of the men and he says, "But the rest of you lily whites, look at how your captain's fighting. Do any of you dare do less?" And we can see in the background the captain with his big wings on his hat, just kicking butt. And then he dies. So it's like they take a moment to point out, look at him, look at the captain. Look at how hard he's fighting, and the rest of you dogs are doing nothing. And I don't know if they're trying to illustrate that maybe Juma, his calling out like that, singled out who the captain was, because 2 panels later, as we're watching him fight, he gets shot in the heart by an arrow. That's how he dies. And I don't know. I don't know if that's kind of what I feel is like captain was doing great. Maybe the hillmen didn't understand that this was the captain until Juma shouted that out.
"Do not salute me. There are goddamn snipers all around this area who'd love to grease an officer."
I don't know. There's arrows flying all over the place. It's going to hit somebody at some point, right? One of them's going to kill somebody at some point. But it's here that we first see Princess Yolanda. They haven't mentioned her yet at all in this story. All we know is that Conan is out with this band of Turanian cavalry, the finest of Agripper's soldiers, along with this Captain Kirabor. But at the end here of page 6, we have 4 panels on the bottom part of page 6. The first panel shows Juma shouting out about the captain, kicking ass. The second panel shows the captain kicking ass. There's something behind him, looks kind of like a litter, that they carry important people in, big boxy thing with curtains. And then the third panel, we see an arrow fly into his chest. And the fourth panel, we see into the litter, and we see that it's Princess Yolanda.
A princess?
I'll admit, when I first read this, I didn't quite understand what I was seeing. It doesn't, just looking at the images without any context, without any text, I didn't pick up on the fact that A, there was a litter behind Kirabor, and B, that when we see Princess Yolanda, that she was the one in the litter and that Kiribor is, basically died to protect her. Now, the narration, for me, it doesn't really help. It helped and didn't help. Here, I'll tell you what. You be the judge. Another strangeness, that one moment a man may stand at the very center of life's silvery stage. The next, be a thing fit only for the fattening of scavengers, and no help at all to that which he died to protect. So if anything, again, taking this completely out of context, not knowing who this character will eventually be and how the story turns out and blah, 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 I look at this and again, I still hadn't noticed the litter in the background. And I just assumed that when we see Princess Yolanda here at the bottom of page 6, that she's somewhere else. It didn't dawn on me until probably the next page that's what's going on. It took me a moment to figure that kind of stuff out. So I don't know if that's a fault of Neil Adams. I don't know if that's a fault of Roy Thomas. Could just be my fault. You tell me. Turn the page 7, more fighting going on. Conan, he's separated from the rest of the cavalry. He's fighting. He's kicking ass like normal. But then some guy stabs his horse right in the butt with his sword. The horse dies. Conan rolls off of the horse, hits his head. He's a little frazzled. He's a little stunned. He's trying to get up. Neil does a good job of drawing these little things around Conan's head so you can see that he's dizzy, that he doesn't have all his faculties. He's a little shaky. And he reaches out his hand, and Juma is there to grasp it, and he lifts him up. Now, the narration here says, stunned, Conan reaches out, and help is there. A familiar hue, a familiar voice. So maybe Conan's vision was blurry. He's reaching out. Somebody takes his hand to help him up. He looks to see who it is. And because Juma is a black man, that's really all he sees because his vision is blurry and he's dazed and he knows right away, okay, he's on my side. So Juma and Conan start fighting together. They mention that many of the Turanian soldiers have fled, that they're basically these two guys, Juma and Conan, are the only ones left. And then Conan is smacked in the back of the head by someone wielding a mace. And as he's falling to the ground, that's a nice panel, the last panel on page 7, he's falling to the ground. His helmet's falling off of his head. He basically falls face first into the snow and rock. And the narration mentions that this war helm saves Conan from a splintered skull. He'll be grateful to it, no doubt, when he wakens. But by then, they'll be far apart. I like that narration. I don't know why. You immediately know that we're never going to see this helmet again, basically. Which is fine. I don't know what it is about horned helmets on Conan's head. I don't immediately like it. And yet, it's also deeply familiar and makes me feel good inside.
Well, I guess that explains it.
Can't explain it. Page 8, Conan wakes to find out that he and Juma are the last survivors and that they are captives and are being taken to somewhere called the Valley of the Sun to be used as slave labor. And they set off. Conan and Juma are both shirtless now at this point, and their wrists are chained together by manacles. At the bottom of the page is where we learn that the woman that they're escorting, or that their mission, the reason why they're out here is because they're escorting the Princess Yolanda back to Agripur or somewhere. I don't think they actually quite specify at this point. Page 9, after traveling in the hills, in the snow for however long, it's been cold, it's been freezing. Conan loves it because it reminds him of home. Juma, on the other hand, is from Kush, where it's basically hot. Kush, I guess, is supposed to be Africa, so you have some areas that are rainforests, some areas that are more plains and in the savanna, whatnot. But eventually, we learn here with page 9, eventually, as they're trekking through the hills, it starts to get warmer, and they come into this valley that is lush and verdant. It's green grass and trees, and it's a jungle-like environment, which Juma quite enjoys. And by the end of page 9, as they're trekking through this jungle, a rhinoceros comes bursting out of the woods, comes bursting out of the trees, and as Conan is yelling, "Crom!" Juma shouts, "Look out! Unicorn!" Which is funny. But this page represents where Neil Adams was when they were told that, hey, we're not doing the black and white story anymore. We're going to turn this into a 19-page story for the color comic book.
Hey, I tried to teach you how to handle comics in the 6th grade, but oh no, you wanted to play Little League instead.
Now, in Roy's book, I think he mentions that they were 5 pages in, but this is page number 6. If you start at the title page, he specifically mentions in the book that when we get to the page with the rhinoceros, that was the last page that either Neil had drawn or that was the page that he was on when the decision was made to make the changes. So I don't know. It's 6 pages instead of 5. Who knows what's right and what's wrong? Page 10, Conan is basically standing in silent terror as this rhinoceros bears down on him. Juma, again, saves his life by knocking him out of the way, and Juma tells him,
"You're a superstitious fool, white man. It's just a half-blind unicorn such as walking my homeland. Nothing to be afraid of, if your eyes are better than his."
And it's funny. I mean, it's funny that, they refer to this, this animal, this rhinoceros, as a unicorn. I think I've read a number of times that the whole legend of a unicorn comes from the finding of a rhinoceros skull or some prehistoric ancestor of a rhinoceros. So it's interesting that they're calling this rhinoceros a unicorn in this story. And it's also interesting that Juma points out that it's a half-blind unicorn, because I'm pretty sure that I've read that the rhinoceros does not have good eyesight, and it's not difficult to evade one. You just have to stay out of its eye line, basically. So yeah, that's pretty neat. But Conan, who's now on the jungle floor about to pick himself up, he still seems really scared, and Juma's trying to figure out why, and that's when we see the rhinoceros running off into the distance and some kind of giant creature. The narration refers to it as a larger reptilian monstrosity. It kind of bursts out of nowhere and grabs up the rhinoceros to eat it. Whether to carry it off and eat it later, don't know. But we've seen that kind of scene before. The one that always springs to mind, of course, is, well, any scene. There's always a scene in the Jurassic Park movies where, for example, the very first one, the very end, Velociraptor is about to kill our characters, and Tyrannosaurus Rex shows up at the last second and eats it. There's also the scene in Star Wars, Force Awakens.
I'm so sorry to break in here, but I think what Steeven meant to say was Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Thank you.
When Obi-Wan Kenobi and Liam Neeson, why can't I think of the name of his Jedi? Why can't I think of his character name? Doesn't matter. They're in that underwater craft with Jar Jar Binks, and there's a big giant fish that's about to eat him, but then an even bigger fish, sea creature thing comes out and eats the smaller one. And Qui-Gon Jinn, that's his name, he says, "There's always a bigger fish."
There's always a bigger fish.
And so that's what this made me think of, even though this came first. Anyway, eventually, by the end of page 10, they are taken into the Valley of the Sun, and they are standing before a tall citadel, which appears to have some kind of, there's like buildings all around it. There's like a city all around it, but the citadel itself is just this round tower that stretches up into the sky, way, like, good Lord, 20 times, 30, 40 times taller than any of the other buildings around it. And there appear to be more buildings on top of it. Conan points out that he doesn't see a door at all near the bottom of the tower. And so he assumes that the tower is just a hollow shell. I don't know why that the fact that there's no door at the bottom of the tower automatically means it's hollow. I don't know. But ultimately, he's wondering at how they're supposed to get into this place. We learn how on page 11, next to the tower, there is a fountain, looks kind of like a fountain with a big glass ball in the middle of it, a ball that's big enough that people can get inside it, up to 5-6 people maybe. And it's floating there on the water. There's a little bridge to the glass ball. Guard refers to it as a bubble, and he tells the princess and Conan to get into the bubble.
A bubble.
A bubble? A bubble.
Yes, a bubble.
Once they're inside of the bubble, the water in the fountain shoots out. It's like a big It's like a big geyser, just shoots out this big geyser, this big tower of water with that ball, that bubble perched atop of it. When it shoots up, the princess starts to fall over and Conan catches her. The bubble gets to the top of the stream of water, which happens to be even with the top of the tower, and they can just step out into the top of the tower, and they go into the buildings, the temple or whatever it is at the top. And as they're going in, we are privy to a bit of dialogue from the princess, and it's like they don't give us everything she's saying. It starts with the ellipses, the ... So it's almost as if we're going from the scene of them getting out of the bubble to a scene from within this palace. We're seeing Conan and Yolanda and the guards coming in, and it cuts to the scene as she's speaking. And I don't know, again, for a comic book, I like that kind of stuff. I like when they can do stuff that you can see happening. You can see that being made in a TV show or a movie. But at the same time, I also love it when I see stuff in comic books that you couldn't translate to TV or to a movie. But anyway, what Yolanda's saying is,
"And I'll thank you, Cimmerian, not to touch my royal self again." "Not till you ask me to, girl,"
is Conan's reply. But as they're doing this, as we're seeing this, we're also seeing in the very same panel, off to the side, behind like a wall in a doorway, crouched, ready to attack, is some kind of weird rat, wolf creature. Narration refers to it as the misborn offspring of man and baboon that might have been human once, but they don't clarify. But whatever it is, it springs out of its hiding place, snatches up Yolanda, and runs away. Conan chases after them because it's his duty. He's there to keep her safe. She is his charge, and he will do anything to protect her, despite the fact, as they point out later in the issue, she is the daughter of Prince Yezdegerd, who wants to kill Conan. So at the bottom of page 11, Conan has chased this creature into the throne room where we meet Rotath, who is now golden. His skin is golden, and it glimmers like real gold. So we have to assume that he is a solid gold construct brought to life. And as Conan runs into the throne room, sees the dude sitting there on the throne, sees the ape thing crouching over Yolanda, he starts shouting that she is his charge. He is meant to bring her safely back to Agripur. So now we learn that that's the point of what they were trying to do, just to get her back to Agripur. But Rotath tells us that, nah, it's not going to happen. No one's going to leave the tower ever again, and he will be marrying Princess Yolanda so that he can be connected to the throne of Turin, especially after she becomes the mother of his son.
Hither Came Conan will return after these messages. According to the latest report from falsifiedstats.com, there are currently 12 million active comic book podcasts clogging up the internet superhighway, and 2.3 million new comic book podcasts are being created every single day. If you're looking for something a little different, then let me tell you about Mike's Comic Shop Roadshow. Mike travels the globe and visits comic shops along the way, talking to the owners, or really just whomever happens to be minding the store that day. And it's through these conversations that you'll meet some wonderful people and learn how comic shops are run in places like Murfreesboro, Illinois, and Liverpool, New South Wales, Australia. So check out Mike's Comic Shop Roadshow, a truly unique comic book podcast among billions of the same old, same old. Find it now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Mike, and I approve this message.
A long time ago, in a comic book rack far, far away. During the years between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, Marvel Comics kept the Star Wars magic alive, delivering bold new stories, expanding the mythology, and taking our favorite heroes and villains on unforgettable adventures. Now join me, the irredeemable Shag, and an ever-changing roster of guest hosts as we journey back to this incredible era. We begin with a comic adaptation of The Empire Strikes Back and continue through the thrilling tales leading up to Return of the Jedi. If you're a seasoned Star Wars veteran who knows your share of brie from your hoojibs, or a brave explorer venturing into these comics for the first time, this is your hyperspace lane to classic Star Wars adventure. Join us for Marvel Star Wars, From Empire to Jedi, every other month on the Fire and Water Podcast Network. Beginning in June 2025.
And now back to Hither Came Conan.
Page 12, we learn that the baboon creature, its name is Anaxor. Rotath refers to it as his pet, and he commands that it attack and kill Conan. The thing jumps at Conan. Conan, however, is faster than his muscly body appears, and he is able to dodge the leap and wrap his chain around the throat of the creature and kill it.
Wow, that was kind of brutal.
And it's a great bit because the narration basically tells us that Anaxor is stronger than Conan, and that as they're struggling, Conan is basically behind Anaxor and he's yanking back on the thing's throat. He even it doesn't quite look like he has his knee in the thing's back, but I'm sure he does. But the narration points out that if the struggle had lasted a little longer, if Conan had not managed to then it looks like he's breaking his neck, not just strangling the thing. It looks like he breaks its neck and possibly its back, its spine, the thing's spine at the same time. But the narration points out that if the struggle had lasted any longer, the creature's strength would have won over and it would have bested Conan because it's stronger. Anyway, with the Anaxor now dead at his feet, Conan shouts out,
"All right, you bumpkins dressed up like warriors. Now let's see if you have any more war skills than did this dead monkey here."
And Rotath, as this page is coming to an end, is screaming,
"Seize him! Slay him! For the honor of your divine sovereign! For the honor of Rotath, the all-conquering!"
Conan, using his chain that binds his manacles together, he uses it as a weapon. Narration tells us,
Conan's birthplace was a raging battlefield. Thus, his only answer to the hillmen's eerie new monarch is slashed in bold letters of blood with free-swinging chains for their stylus.
That's a great bit of narration. I got to give it up to old Roy for that. But as Conan is basically killing all these guards with this chain, Rotath shouts out that he needs to stop. Conan looks, and Rotath is holding the princess by the hair on the top of her head. It's like he's holding her up, and he's got a sword to her throat, and he tells Conan that if he doesn't stop, he's going to slit her throat. Juma, however, kind of forgot he was there, but Juma sees something that Conan doesn't. He grabs a spear from one of the guards, he throws it over Conan's shoulder, and he hits Yolanda square between the boobies.
Boobies?
She screams and drops to the ground. Conan is pissed. He starts yelling at Juma, but Juma points out to him, look, it wasn't the princess. It was Anaxor, who is already dead. Rotath was just holding up his pet monkey and using an enchantment to make Conan think that he was holding up the princess. But he didn't use his enchantment on Juma. And Rotath says in the final panel of page 13, I underestimated you, black man, and didn't bother mesmerizing you. Go to page 14 and he finishes, an error I won't make again. So basically, Rotath is a racist piece of shit who sees Juma there with Conan. He's getting ready to cast this spell to mesmerize Conan. He looks at Juma and says, he's a black man. He is a savage. He's not worth mesmerizing because he's stupid. And learns that, not the case. It's at this point that Conan and Juma start making their way toward Rotath, but Rotath, being a wizard, puts a spell on them. He has something up his sleeves that he throws, some kind of powder or something that he throws at both Juma and Conan that basically puts them to sleep. And as Conan is falling asleep or passing out, the narration says, the last thing Conan's glazed eyes see is Yolanda, daughter of a man who has sworn to kill him, yet so pitifully, appealingly helpless. The middle of the page, we get another couple of panels where Conan is waking up and everything's black and he sees pinpoints of light. And now he's underground. He's in the mines with Juma. There are guards there that carry whips, and immediately one of them starts whipping Conan, or maybe it's not really clear. Somebody seems to be bending over to pick up another man who's on the ground, and one of these guards is whipping the guy in the back. Could be Conan, I don't know. What we do know, however, though, is by the end of this page, we learn that they have been in these mines for a few days, and Juma discovers that all this gold that they have been mining for, most of it is being placed into these carts, and they're being rolled deeper into the mine. And so they want to kind of figure out what's going on there. Why are they not taking the gold out of the mine like you would, and instead taking it deeper into the mine? Page 15, Conan and Juma overpower a couple of guards. They get into one of these carts and they go rolling on down the tracks deeper into the mine. One of the guards is about to... There are other guards basically that are around that see this happening. They're throwing spears at them. And as one guard is about to chuck his spear, another guard stops him and tells him that there's no need. They're escaping into the forbidden zone, basically, and the two of them will discover soon enough why it's forbidden. Conan and Juma are just rolling downhill in this cart in a tunnel in the dark. They have no idea where they're going. They have no idea what's ahead of them. They're fearing it. They fear that they're going to smash into a wall. But they end up coming to the end of the tracks, which come out over this large cavernous area, kind of like a bridge that stops, and there's a big barrier at the end of it that the cart slams into, tips over, throws Juma and Conan out, and they fall to the floor of this cavern, only to find another one of these giant reptilian creatures. It looks like a lizard. Juma points out that it could be the very same one that ate the unicorn earlier in the issue, or at least its brother. Conan, on the other hand, is like, you know what? Let's not worry about it. Let's just freaking run. I'm not a big fan. This is like the second, maybe third time I've seen them use a lizard, a giant lizard, in these Conan books, and it's actually referred to in this issue and other issues when I've seen them. They're referred to as dragons. The reason why that annoys me is because it makes me think of old movies where if they had a dinosaur or a dragon or something in it, the special effects, I'm talking about going so far back that even stop motion wasn't a thing. They weren't really doing a lot with stop motion. And so they would stick a lizard in there, and that would be the dragon or the dinosaur. And that's what this makes me think of, because they don't have to draw a lizard. Back then, those movies were limited. They could only do what they could do. And here, we're only limited to Neil's ability to draw some fantastical creature. Same with every other time we've saw a lizard instead of a dragon. And I don't know if that's because, the Hyborian Age is supposed to be in our past. And so rather than using actual fantastical creatures like the unicorn, we had a rhinoceros instead of a actual dragon. It's just a giant lizard. Still, I don't like it. I'm not a big fan of it. I'd rather see not a typical fantasy, dragon like you see in any other kind of fantasy comic or movie or TV show, but something that is dragon-like, but I don't know, not just a big lizard.
This time of year, talk about your big lizards.
Go to page 16 of the story. Juma and Conan are running from the lizard. They're climbing up the trellis back to the tracks. There's a big pool of water in the middle of this cavern, and out of this pool of water comes a giant slug which devours the lizard. Well, as Conan and Juma are watching this happen, one thing that they haven't mentioned and is not obvious from the art is that apparently there's just gold lying all over the floor in this cavern. And so as this slug is eating the giant lizard, Juma takes up a bag and starts filling it with gold. Conan does the same. And then the slug starts coming after him and they run away.
And now, a bit of fun.
Fun fact about this page. I'll tell you what, this is from Roy's book in Roy's own words.
One of the odd highlights of Conan number 37 was the giant slug which slithers through the later pages of the story. Neil didn't fool me when he drew the slug's face to resemble female genitalia. The fact was never mentioned overtly between us. Neil simply smiled obliquely when I hinted I knew what he was up to. But I decided to ignore it and see if the comics code would notice and object. Hey, maybe I just had a dirty mind, and what Neil had actually drawn was the artistic equivalent of a Rorschach blot. You could see in it whatever you wanted to. We'd let the code tell us if we were going to corrupt anybody's young mind. The code evidently preferred to see the slug's face as just a slug's face, so the issue was printed as penciled. Or maybe they were busy blushing and were afraid we'd accuse them of having a dirty mind.
What? You mean the slug is dirty? It's just a slug.
Now, I have done about 15 seconds of research to see if I could find what the actual mouth of a slug looks like, but what I found in those 50 seconds were a little similar to what we're seeing in this issue, and yet not similar at the same time. So, I don't know. Do you see female genitalia or do you see a slug's mouth? That's for you to decide.
I know about vaginas.
We turn the page. We're on 17, page 17 of the story. Juma and Conan have run out of this forbidden zone. They're back in the main area of the mines. They're still being chased by the slug, and they basically force their way through the main area of the mine, killing guards, pushing guards aside. The slug is rolling through them. I'm assuming, or we can assume, that the slug is eating guards as it chases Conan and Juma. In fact, we know that it was eating guards because Juma brings it up.
Favors of Ishtar! Why does that slug thing keep pursuing us whichever way we turn?
Says Conan.
Aye, you'd think there'd be hillmen enough to act as dessert and rivers of blood to wash the dragon taste out of its mouth,
says Juma. So they keep running. They're now outside. They're running toward the temple. Down at the bottom, the base of the tower, there's a bunch of people gathered because Rotath has thrown a wedding ceremony and he's about to marry the Princess Yolanda. As we get to the bottom of page 17, Rotath turns to see what all the fuss is about. He sees the giant slug, or at least he sees something, something that scares the crap out of him. Turn to page 18 of the story, and he sees that it is the slug, and he calls out,
No, this cannot be. I satisfied its cravings, fed it what it wanted. Why did it come here?
And he picks up Princess Yolanda and runs off with her. I should point out that they have done a good job, or at least, Neil Adams has made sure that there's always what appears to be, well, wasn't quite sure how to put this. Rotath appears to always be glowing because he's made of gold. He's always shimmering and shining because he's a golden man. But he picks up Princess Yolanda and he starts running from the slug. He jumps into that bubble and rides the shaft of water up to the top of the tower, or they're in mid-ride. And Conan comes running up to the fountain where the bubble was. He's carrying 2 sacks of gold. And as he reaches the shaft of water, the slug is right there next to him. And the slug ignores him and starts looking up at the bubble. That's when Conan puts 2 and 2 together and realizes that the slug eats gold.
As much gold as I could eat.
That's why the slug had been chasing him and Juma, because they were both carrying sacks full of gold. And that's why the slug is now very interested in Rotath, because he is either solid gold or his flesh and bones are made from gold. They don't really clarify, but there's something about the gold that Rotath is made of that attracts this slug more than any other gold. Maybe it's because it's magical. Don't know. But once Conan figures this out, he takes both of his sacks full of gold and he throws them into the fountain. The slug sees this and goes after the bags. By doing so, it basically uses its immense body to cover the shaft of water that's shooting out of this fountain. So it stops the bubble from rising and the bubble falls. We see that when we turn the page to 19. The bubble falls onto the back of the slug. The slug, being a slug, it's soft, flabby, as the narration puts it. It's squishy. So it kind of breaks the fall of the globe, the bubble. And Rotath kicks the door open, runs out, abandoning Yolanda completely.
Out of my way, woman! That thing wants my gold flesh! But I'll flee!
And that's when he is consumed by the slug. And what it actually looks like here on page 19, the slug grabs Rotath up by its mouth, sucks it into itself, and then Rotath comes back out, but he's just regular. He's a regular human now. He's flesh colored. So it sucked all of the gold flesh off of him, and then he's dead and just drops out of its mouth onto the ground below. The slug, now full, just kind of creeps away and goes back down underground where it lives. The very final panel of the story, we have Yolanda and Conan on one horse and Juma on another horse. And here's what they say as the issue ends.
"My father will rejoice,"
says Yolanda.
"Still, Rotath would never have used me, for I'd have killed myself with this dagger right after the wedding. To a Turanian princess, after all. There are some fates that are worse than death."
"And others far better, eh, Juma?"
Conan responds.
"So they say, Cimmerian. So they say."
And that's how it ends. You almost expect, it feels like one of those, we talk about it all the time on the Superman Super Show. It feels like one of those endings to an old TV show or sitcom where they make a joke, everybody freezes in laughter, and then the credits roll and the music plays. And I always think of the show Police Squad when I see these. Police Squad was a show in the 80s made by the people who did the Airplane movies. They really liked Leslie Nielsen in the Airplane movies, and so they made this show for him. It's a police procedural type show, but it's a comedy. It's very much in the same vein as Airplane. And of course, they ended up making a series of movies out of the show called the Naked Gun franchise, and they've just rebooted that recently. But it always makes me think of that because every episode of Police Squad would end that way. Somebody would make a joke, they'd all start laughing, and then freeze, and then the music would play. But they didn't actually freeze the video. The people were just standing there as still as possible. And there was always something happening in the background to prove that the film itself or the video wasn't frozen. Somebody would walk in, or there was one with a monkey in the background that was throwing stuff at them, and they themselves will move or scratch their nose or something. But yeah, that's what I always think of. And that's why you heard what you heard as I finished reading Juma's line. But that's it. That's the end of the issue. I really enjoyed it. It's interesting to see a Conan drawn by Neil Adams. It does feel that after those 6 pages that he had been working on for the black and white version, at that point when he had to switch over to telling a different story to make it fit 19 pages, it's like they didn't quite have a deadline for the black and white version they were going to do. So he spent a lot of time on those pages and they look really good. If you look at those 6 pages, they look really good. The first 3 pages look really good. After that, though, there's some good stuff, don't get me wrong, but you can see where he is trying to make up for time. But it was colored beautifully. It's drawn beautifully. It was a fun story. A lot of great Roy Thomas narration that felt like Robert E. Howard. And that made this one of my favorite issues. And I hope it's one of yours as well. I don't know why I said it that way. It's like I'm begging for engagement. You know, everybody in videos and whatnot, they're always like, what about you? Did you like this? What do you think about this? Email me. Leave your comments below. But yeah, same thing. Same thing I'm doing. Anyway, that, folks, is all I have to say about Conan the Barbarian number 37, The Curse of the Golden Skull. If you have anything you'd like to add, let me know. The easiest way to do so is by email. The address is feedback@hithercameconan.com. Shoot me a line, and who knows, maybe I'll read it out in a future episode.
Everybody out!
In our next episode, and in Roy's own words, still another first as John Buscema both pencils and inks a full-length fantasy called The Warrior and the Werewoman, adapted freely from the Robert E. Howard thriller, The House of Erebus. Big John fell so in love with this tale as he was penciling it that he decided he just had to ink it himself. That comes directly from the letters page of this issue, telling us what's coming up next. And that's what's coming up on episode number 60, when I take a look at Conan the Barbarian number 38, published by Marvel Comics in February of 1974. The synopsis used in this episode was taken from MarvelFandom.com and then altered, twisted, rewritten, and added to by me. My name is Steeven. The information used in this episode comes from Wikipedia, along with Mike's Amazing World of Comics at Mike'sAmazingWorld.com, and the book, Barbarian Life, a literary biography of Conan the Barbarian, Volume 1, by Roy Thomas, which you can get now at SumerianPress.com. And finally, the views and opinions expressed within this episode are mine and mine alone, and do not reflect the official policy or position of Marvel Comics, Roy Thomas, the Howard Estate, Conan, his sword, his steely thews, his many fans and supporters, and especially his god, Crom.
From Lapsity 4 wins.
One last thing before I let you go, I have a call of action for all of you. If you listen to Hither Came Conan on Apple Podcasts, please, while you're there, leave us a rating. You don't have to write anything. They don't require you to leave a review as well. All you need to do is rate the show. 1 out of 5 stars, 1 being the worst, and 5 being the best. I'm told that the ratings help, and that if you have over 15 or maybe it's 20, I don't know. But once you have a certain number of ratings that are fairly positive, then your show starts showing up on lists and junk, and more people are exposed to it. And that's what we want. As of our previous episode, Hither Came Conan was sitting at 13 ratings, averaging 4.5 stars. But since then, we now have 14 ratings, averaging 4.6 stars. So we're getting there. The goal, however, is to hit 16 stars by the end of the year. So just keep doing what you're doing. But if you haven't had a chance to leave a rating, now would be the time. And hey, if you listen to the show on Spotify, they have a rating system as well. We have 28 ratings over there with an average of 4.7 stars. Well, that's your assignment, folks. If you choose to accept it, you would be doing me a big favor. If you've already done so, then you've already done me a big favor, and so I thank you. And hey, if you want to listen to the show and not do any of that other crap, that's cool too. You be you. That's all you can do. August Frederick Ferdinand Kotzebue, who, by the way, was born in May of 1761, died at 57 in March of 1819, and was a German playwright who also worked as a Russian diplomat, which really has nothing to do with anything. It's just that, well, his name rhymed with to, you, and do. So until next time, folks, keep your swords close by, never stop treading them jeweled thrones, and as always, be nice to each other. Bye!
We would like to thank you for listening to this episode of Hither Came Conan. Questions and comments can be directed to feedback@hithercameconan.com. If you enjoyed the show, you can help to boost our presence online by leaving a rating or review on your favorite podcast app. We would also like to invite you to join our subscription program, Steeven or Else Beyond. And in return, you'll get episodes of Hither Came Conan early and ad-free. Check out the link in the show notes, or just go to hithercameconan.com to sign up today. Hither Came Conan is a presentation of Steeven or Else Media. For more nerdy content hosted by Steeven, check out SoManyPodcasts.com. All links will be in the show notes.
Over 8,000 years before the birth of Conan of Cimmeria, the Lemurian... Over 8,000 years before Conan was even born, over 8,000 years before Conan was born, the Lemurian wizard Rotath... Lemurian. Over 8,000 years before the birth of Conan, the Lemurian wizard Rotath... The Lemurian wizard Rotath died in a temple, cursing those who slew him. The Lemurian Rotath, months after the discovery, Jesus.
I just don't think I can move through life knowing that a guy named Steeven did this to me.
How could you let this happen, Steeven?
Your podcast sucks.
Enough talk.
Great Crom.